Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our new Logisim webinar, run this week with our friends at NTUC, UA, and Republic Polytechnic. I'm very glad for all of you to have joined us today, and I'm pleased to introduce my co-host, Mr. Gary Lim from Logisim. So Gary's normally behind the scenes, coordinating with partners, but today he's stepped up because it's a topic that's near and dear to him. He's going to be talking and participating in today's webinar as well. Brief introduction of our two panelists this morning. We've got Stephanie Krishnan from IDC, and we've got Mr. Dennis Quack from Republic Poly. And I'll hand it over to Steph to introduce herself first before having Dennis give a short introduction of himself.
Hi, good morning all. I hope you're all well. Yeah, my name is Stephanie Krishnan. I work for IDC. I'm the Research Director of Manufacturing Insights Asia Pacific, and my area of research responsibility is in the area of supply chain and Industry 4.0. I come from a background of academic as well as small business and large business employment. So I've been preparing my whole life for this career, I guess. But I find these times particularly exciting as we're seeing COVID press us into change like before, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation today to discuss the impact on people.
Excellent, thanks, Steph. And Dennis, over to you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Dennis, as I was introduced. Ironically, although I'm from Republic Poly, unlike Stephanie, who has an academic background, I have zero academic background. Yeah, I joined the Polytechnic in 2012 to get the Center of Innovation for Supply Chain going. It's a center that helps companies in Singapore build or strengthen supply chain capabilities, right? And we do it through innovation in process and innovative use of technology. So I'm also happy to be here today to have a conversation.
Great, Dennis. Thanks. And that's exactly what we're going to have, yeah? So this is not going to be one of those webinars where you sit down and you listen to people presenting for 30, 45 minutes. We want this to be interactive. That's why we've got two hosts. Keep those questions coming in. Gary is standing by. You can put it in the chat. You can raise your hand, and we can even promote you to speak live. So we really want to keep this interactive. So starting off, let's start off with something simple, and let's do some level setting here, Dennis. And we talked a bit about this in the conversations that we had in the run-up to this webinar. What's the difference between digitalization and digitization? Simple one.
Well, I'll get I'll get started. Yeah, actually, unfortunately, the two words have been often I hear it being used quite interchangeably, but actually they're very, very different, right? Digitization really is about converting. It's simply put, is from converting from analog to a digital world, right? Things that you used to do on paper, to convert them into digital information, right? And then digitalization actually, therefore, is a stringing together of different process using different digital tools, right? To bring about all the goodness that digitization promises. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So, our topic is racing with the machine. Yeah? The reason why we came up with this topic is that there is a bit of concern with a lot of SMEs, with a lot of supply chain professionals, with people in general, around robots and artificial intelligence replacing us. Do you think that's really the case, Dennis?
Well, I don't. For start, I do have a slight issue with the topic itself, in the sense that I don't see ourselves per se racing with the machines, right? We're actually racing against competitors who are using machines, and that's what we need to be mindful about, right? Myself and my colleagues, I think, while we believe a lot in digitalization and in automation and in use of machines, we really think that the way forward, and the way we really need to think about machines really is about machines helping us, augmenting us, right, as opposed to replacing us. I'll just leave that first, maybe for Stephanie to chime in.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's the position that our competition is taking. I literally have just gotten off a call where I was talking to companies in Singapore and Malaysia, and their biggest concern is, there is, China plus one policies that are coming out from companies. And this is not just, multinationals, it's large, medium-sized companies as well. But, where we're starting to see them looking at ASEAN as an alternative manufacturing base. They're putting their supply chains here, and they're going to bring down a lot of the digitalization that they've already implemented in those locations, right? Because China, the cost of labor has been increasing, so they're trying to get greater productivity there, and so they're going to bring that technology with them. So if you've got a company that has large amounts of technology already invested, and you're a local guy, the competition is going to increase, right? And you need to get that productivity up. You need to be able to get your costs down. You need to be able to get the economies of scale to compete, because they're going to want to build an ecosystem that's able to deal with the volumes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it gets really competitive. Yeah.
So it's like what Dennis said. Yeah. So we're not racing with the machine. We're racing with our competition, right? They are improving, they're implementing digitalization or digitization. So how do we position ourselves? And I think I like your point about the China plus one thing. With COVID-19, I think that sped up that Anywhere But China initiative, right? People are looking at manufacturing outside of China. So, but of course, we cannot compete with China in terms of labor, for example. We're a higher cost country, although China is not that cheap anymore. So how do we do things better and faster? Yeah.
Right, I think for here now, we'll let us ask a question, right? So with regards to the digitalization and the specific relevance to the hub, right? How does, or rather, what should our government do more to actually promote and incubate such ideas with regards specifically for the small, medium enterprises? Maybe either Dennis or Stephanie can take this question.
Well, funnily enough, I do actually have a data point on here, and we can probably talk a little bit to the direction on what companies understand, with regards to government funding or government resources that are available, right? So let me just put this up. So we have this, IDC does do data. That's our thing. So we do surveys, and we ran this survey. It's an Industry 4.0 survey, and we did it across the entire Asia Pac. And we were looking at how, how manufacturers and how logistics companies, and in this case, we were looking at manufacturing, logistics, and utilities, how they understand the government support that's actually happening out there. Now, to answer your question, Gary, look at the bottom 2 points in this particular slide, which is looking, the number one area where companies said that they do need government support is in the area of assistance with mentoring or consulting support. Basically, there is, some direction needed. A lot of companies, when they go into supply chain or they go into manufacturing, they have their expertise in their own area. So they know how to make their widgets, how to make their gloves, how to do, whatever manufacturing they're doing. They're not necessarily IT geniuses, right? Or grown up with this sort of technology. So having that sort of mentoring and consulting support was the number one area that was flagged for Singapore. And it actually bore out across Asia as well, ASEAN as well. And then the other is in the area of assistance with supply chain ecosystems. So sometimes the policies do address manufacturing quite strongly, and they are quite supportive with grants and tax cuts and skills development. Singapore is quite lucky in that it does have skills development for logistics, but working on the integration between customers, suppliers, and service partners to make sure that there is that joining between, information flows between, to make that real Industry 4.0 capability happen. So they're just the bottom two data points that I think were quite useful in answering that particular question there.
Okay, so this was a survey that you conducted. Could you leave that
Sure.
slide up there, Steph? I think it's a very interesting slide.
So yeah, I think that's a good slide. Yeah,
with the participants as well. There's a few interesting points there. I like point number 2 about that supply chain ecosystem, support for customers, suppliers, and service partners. So switching gears a bit, I mean, we are in Singapore, all of us, are quite familiar with what the government does. But looking at this, 40% unaware or unsure of government grants, right? So there's not enough awareness so the government is not doing a good enough job if only 47% are unaware. Yeah,
So this is specific. This is specific to technology use. So I think when it comes to like things like skills development, etc., they're probably more familiar. But when it comes specifically to technology use, yeah.
So, but needed area of assistance with building that supply chain ecosystem, support for customers, etc., etc. This is an observation that we've had over the last couple of years, like BRI, for example, the Belt and Road Initiative, right? We all know this means that cargo is going to be pulled away from Singapore. We're no longer going to be a transshipment hub. So what do you think are some of the things that we could do, or the government could do, you know, rather than just pushing technology for technology's sake? What can the government do to help spread that awareness and help us develop that supply chain ecosystem? So first part of the question is how to spread awareness better. And the second part for both you and Dennis is how to build that supply chain ecosystem. What can the government do? Dennis, I'll ask you first.
Yeah, well, I think personally for a start, I actually, so just bear with me a little while here. I mean, this particular question actually is it's very dear to my heart, because in the area that I'm involved in, I do feel that a lot of people usually equate supply chain and logistics as being the same, even among government officials. And when we get muddled up between supply chain and logistics as being the same, we actually sometimes don't know how to send that message that there's an ecosystem to help, right? I want to share with you first a story, and maybe in case you know, our audience is also not quite clear, right? So just bear with me, right? You know, in the area of work that I'm in, we deal with all industries, and our message to everybody is that actually every business has a supply chain, but not everybody realizes it. Yeah. Like hotels, for example, whenever I get asked to meet people in the hotel industry, they said, "Oh, you are in supply chain. We have no need of your help." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Oh, because we are in the service industry, so we don't need we don't have problems with logistics because we need more help in service." I said, "But hey, wait a minute, you know." You guys talk about inventory when you refer to your rooms, right? So you deal with inventory just like every one of my other customers, supposedly in supply chain, right? And your inventory is actually perishable, right? Because you sell rooms by the night. So anything you can't sell tonight actually is expired. You can't sell tonight's room tomorrow, right? So you're dealing with so inventory. Your inventory needs to be manufactured every single day, because the moment a room is being used, it's no use. You can't sell that room anymore. So manufacturing takes place every day, right? And in order to manufacture that room, you need materials, you need scheduling, you need resources to be planned and so forth. And you are actually exactly like a factory. So I want to relate this story first and foremost, because I think most people don't realize that first they have supply chains to manage. And if you don't realize that you have supply chains to manage, you actually may not ever find the right help that you need, right? Because so long as you, for example, in this case with the hotel, so long as I keep looking for people with service experience and expecting them to come in and help us to improve our supply, our business operations, which is really a supply chain problem, we may never be able to move forward. So I kind of want to share this story first, that I think hopefully it brings a bit more clarity about the way we need to think about the supply chain within our own businesses. And it's only if we have those kind of clarity, then are we able to look for the right skills and the right competencies to help us, right? And I'm not even touching on digitalization yet. I'm just talking about, you know, expecting and realizing the type of help that would be helpful for us. Yeah. Maybe Stephanie would like to chime in on something first. Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of, you know, I guess one of the comments that Ramon made was, you know, government's promoting digitalization for digitalization's sake. And I honestly don't think that the Singapore government in particular is doing that. I do think that maybe if that's the way that companies feel that the message is being pushed, then the messaging needs to be changed, because, you know, digitalization here is to increase the productivity of organizations. It's to increase the competitiveness on the international stage. It's to make Singapore, you know, who definitely punches above its weight class in terms of competitiveness anyway, keep up, because the potential for neighboring countries to leapfrog Singapore's capabilities is actually quite high. Right. And so when they don't have the investment in legacy systems like, companies may do here, then, they are quite keen to embrace the new technologies, right? Which is something that is happening, right? We're actually seeing this. So, Singapore, the Singapore government perhaps needs to rephrase some of the messaging to say, look, you need to let go of your technology debt. Now, when we talk about technology debt, we're talking about, you've already invested in a certain amount of technology. Maybe it's a legacy system or whatever. You need to kind of acknowledge that it's time to move on and create new opportunities, because otherwise competitors in other countries will, right? Absolutely. And then in terms of developing that ecosystem, it's talking about building the country, the companies that are going to support you. So nobody does this alone. And we've not seen this as much as we have in COVID. Where, looking into suppliers, being able to work with customers to deliver solutions that enable industries to continue and survive is something that's not just needed in times of crisis, it's needed in times of competitive disadvantages, which is something that, we're looking at here.
Right. So cool.
Yeah, and I guess that's why back to I guess my very first comment that was kind of a bit contrarian to today's topic, right? Back to the fact that I think it sometimes doesn't help if we keep saying that we are racing with the machines, because then we become very machine centric. We tend to think that actually technology is going to kind of solve all of the problems that we face, right? Whereas actually first we kind of need perhaps a bit more clarity first about what is it about our business that who are we racing against with, and what is it that we kind of need to put in place to establish our competitive advantage, and then we think about how technology can help us, right? As opposed to thinking upfront that technology will essentially solve all of our problems, which is not the case.
So yeah, technology doesn't solve our problems. Sometimes technology can make our problems faster. Yeah.
Yes.
You speed up the process. Yeah. Okay.
Precisely.
So switching gears a bit. So we all agree, yeah? We've kind of level set. We've explained what digitization and digitalization is. We are reinforcing the fact that we're actually not racing against the machine, but we're racing against our competition, right? And this slide from Steph, I think we can take the slide down, but I think the slide says that, not enough of us are aware of what sort of government incentives are out there. And more importantly, I like that point number 2 about creating an ecosystem. So if I'm an SME, how do I start with this? How should companies who are SMEs start along this digitalization journey? Steph or Dennis, either one of you.
I'll let Dennis start.
Yeah. Actually, unfortunately, again, I want to be a bit more critical here. That I think that actually, in fairness, first and foremost, the Singapore government does offer a huge ecosystem to provide assistance, right? But well, on the one hand, yes, it could be that maybe myself included, right? I mean, my center is part of the ecosystem. One way to look at it is maybe our outreach is not as good, right? But we are kind of more focused at providing help than providing then kind of focus on the outreach, and then kind of not therefore paying attention to the actually providing the actual help. But I think it would help if as with most things, that people have more of a growth mindset, and that is continuous learning, right? I think if we continuously learn, continuously realize things that we don't know, right? I think it's only when we realize that there are things out there that we don't know, then we will start finding out how do we get to know, right? And I think for most people who really kind of by chance find out about us, it is actually through those journeys, right? That they realize that, well, there's some help that they need, and they start asking either through the internet or just asking associates in the business or in the industry as to where they've actually gotten help themselves. That you will begin to find answers, right? But if you're kind of just sitting down here in your own office and kind of lamenting that I don't know where to get help, help isn't going to come, right? Because yeah. things generally don't work like that. I think we need to have that sense of like
have that inquisitive mind. Go out there and ask.
Precisely. Yeah, to want to ask questions. Yeah.
First thing to do is go out there and start asking, learning. Right. What else would you add to that, Steph?
I would say look at where you've lost deals and why. You know, like you could be losing. You know, so if you're losing business, if you've lost a deal, ask why. You know, what was the competitive advantage that a competitor had over yours? You know, when you're looking at that, the other assumption that sometimes small businesses make is, I'm a small business, I don't have budget for all these fancy things that, you know, the MNCs have. It doesn't need that budget, right? There are so many tools out there that are designed for SMEs, as well as, you know, allow you to implement the processes that you need and can structure that, you know, using CRM, you know, little, you know, WMSs, that it doesn't have to be the super duper, you know, big brand ones, although they have their value, but it allows you to start getting the discipline in to migrate to those as your company grows, right? You know, they're just finding out where your complaints are, where you're losing business, and then looking around at your competitors and saying and look at some of the big ones and say what features, benefits, solutions are they providing that you want to provide, and you see that as something that will be valuable to your customers, right? And the last thing I would suggest is that you talk to the vendors, because it used to be that when I wanted to do, you know, digitalize something and I wanted to have a system, then I would take my processes and I would go to the vendor and I would say, hey, Mr. Vendor, can you help me digitalize this? But now a lot of vendors through technology actually have a better idea of what's possible, right? And can help you innovate even as a small business, right? It doesn't have to be, you know, this is not something that's the realm of large businesses. They can help you innovate.
Oh, brilliant. I really like your responses, Dennis and Steph. So ask questions, have that inquisitive mind, yeah? And then to add to that, look at where we have lost deals, right? So like Dennis said at the start, we're not racing with the machine, but we're racing with our competition. So look at what they're doing better than us maybe as well. And talk to vendors, ask them how they can help us. So we've got also a great bunch of questions coming in on the chat.
Yeah. Maybe I'll just add one more point.
No, you cannot. You're
yeah, actually coming from the Polytechnic, I frequently encourage even small SMEs to take student interns. On the one hand, when the Polytechnic wants to put students to the industry, is for the students to learn, but there is also a lot of benefit, I personally think, for companies to learn from the students, because the students are all digital natives, right? They come across a lot more tools than we ever will. You know, I relate to you a personal story. Right? This is like 3 years ago. I spoke to my team. I said that, okay, chatbot seems to be pretty big then. And I said, let's go figure out if we can use, how we can use chatbots. And one of my student interns said, oh, I can tell you about chatbots. I said, oh, you know, how is it that you know about chatbots? And she said that, oh, actually she runs a small online store online, but she has to attend class every day and she has no time to attend to queries that come in from Facebook Messenger. So she uses a chatbot to you know, so I like to share this story because we cannot always assume that the people with the experience will know everything, right? The students, every cohort of students increasingly come in with more and more digital literacy and competency, and they certainly know a lot more tools out there that is helping them to do their homework or their assignments, right, much better than the tools that we have in the past, right? So that's another source to learn, I feel.
So Dennis, I think that that's a fair comment, and it's a very valid one, especially with the evolution of chatbots with AI and machine learning embedded in it, right? I think one of the questions right, that we have from the floor is that, you know, from your perspective, or even Steph, for the matter of fact, right, what should the Singapore government, right, in partnership with the technology vendors, the service providers, right, how can we increase the adoption of the digitalization? Like rightfully, like what you mentioned, especially in the hotel industries, where we know that the finance, the HRs are all still very manual process driven. Any one of you can take the question?
Well, I think one of the ways that they can start is start embracing the momentum of change that has been caused by COVID-19, right? So looking at this requirement to have, 50-50 split teams is forcing companies to digitize, right? Which is the first step. All right. And I've been talking to logistics companies in Singapore that have, looking at digitizing their operations, going from manual forms, going to, digitized communications. And believe it or not, it still happens, right? So as orders go through manufacturing processes or they go through the supply chain, there is still, manual aspects to this. So look at, if starting from basics, start addressing that digitization, and then don't expect that that's, you're going to get a one-to-one replacement there. You're going to get a an exponential replacement, because you're going to be able to do more with those documents. And in terms of, talking to, what role does government or anything have to facilitate this? I mean, government can start by mandating that, documents, invoices, and all that have to be digital, right? Especially in the way, and that's usually the way that broad countries do change, is they say, okay, we're requiring that you don't submit physical papers. It has to be digital, and it can't be a scanned manual printed document. It has to be, an automatically generated one, and start automating, putting in a process that allows organizations to go on a journey to upgrade to that. So, we're seeing that with Singapore Customs, right? So that you do have that digital capability, but then started taking that to the next step. So it actually is extracting the digital data. There's less manual input, et cetera, et cetera. So taking the companies on the journey with the processes that are enforced by the government. It's one way.
So Steph, I think based on this way, right, that we are looking at, right, so Dennis, hold on a second, right? What I would like to add on is that, would there be a form of a re-education in terms of how we perceive the values and taking them through the journey? Would it be an institution that drives this, or is it more of a society per se, whereby we curate such information through articles or webinars as such to educate the organizations to undertake this journey that would help them in the long run?
It's going to be a mixture of both. In order to meet the minimum capability, it's going to have to be some sort of structured, this is how you do it, right? So there will be either done through institutions or government training, or, it could be follow in the footsteps of some of the larger software providers, where they actually have in context help, and it's pretty much self-help, right? But in terms of creating a competitive advantage through this, right, so that you're actually able to automate how you submit documents, you're able to, get on board with the network trade platform and these sort of capabilities, then that's when you do have that curation and being able to, create your competitive advantage is going to be the second part that you mentioned, right? So where you're looking at inspiration from that. So that's.
I think there's no lack of places to receive all forms of digital training. I mean, coming from a polytechnic, if you go surf the net on all the training, be it private or public institutions, I think there's no lack of digital training. I think there's only the lack of willingness to want to go and do it, right? And I think the government is doing. I mean, the government, you may or may not be aware, but from a public service point of view, it is actually already mandated that all of public services must have a digital or must be digital, right? 100% end to end. And I think the government is trying to kind of lead that, because when the government does that, then when you want to transact with the government, you are forced to be digital. And then it's a bit like ISO in the old days, right? ISO 9000, where if you're the chain leader, you tell your suppliers that, well, unless you are also qualified, I won't be dealing with you, right? So in a sense, the government is leading from that point of view. And I think for SMEs, ultimately, it will be kind of this kind of peer pressure or pressure from the industry that will have to drive them. But they also need, like I said, to have that willingness to to move forward on their own. They can't always be led, right? Because if you're always being led, essentially you cannot be a leader if you're always being led.
Yeah, and also, I mean, just to be a bit controversial here, if you want to rely on our government to lead us, and I'm not talking about the government as in the government, but I'm talking about government bodies. are they really the best people? Because I just put something a bit controversial in the chat here. I said, because there's a great question from Randall asking for specific examples of how the government can help. My response to that was, first of all, does the government really understand what supply chain management is? So, the government agencies. So is it going to be a case of the blind leading the blind? So now I think we've discussed a lot of things here, but maybe starting to look at wrapping up as well. So what should we do in the near, mid and long term? We've all got COVID-19 on our minds, right? I think Singapore, we're a bit lucky because we have very, very low numbers. Really, the government has done a great job there, and of course the population as well. But what's next? What should we look at, say, because we are in October. So all of us are planning for what 2021 looks like. So in the near term, what do you think we should be looking at for next year when we're planning our supply chains? And in the medium term, after 21, what should we be looking at or thinking about? Who wants to jump in? Steph or Dennis?
Well, I don't think it's any one particular year, right? but the current health crisis that's kind of put us where we are today does drive that urgency for us to get digital, because that physical contact, the traditional way through kind of physical contact, physical documents and so forth, is really hindering the speed of doing business. So I think circumstances are already forcing us, whether we like it or not, to look for a more digital way to do our work. But we really kind of need to think again back to the message, I think, of not trying to be too focused on technology to begin with. I think I think it's very evergreen, right? That we must always have first and foremost clarity about.
That's a very funny
what is our business about, right? And what is this value
of the Supply Center of Innovation, Dennis?
Right.
Sorry to interrupt you.
And by the way, if there are questions about how to get started or where to get help, I think a good starting point is you can talk to myself. Maybe they can contact Logisim for my contact. We may not have all the answers, but hopefully we can bring you to other people that can provide you with the help.
Okay. What about yourself, Steph?
I think should we look at? Three main areas. One would be around looking at visibility, automation, and connectivity. All right, so they would be the three that I would look at in the short to mid-term. Visibility is about, getting connected with your suppliers, being able to see, the ability, and this does not have to be, huge amounts. It can be automated using email. It can be, and visibility and automation generally go quite close together. You can automate using, Excel files being emailed to a certain location, et cetera, right? So there are relatively low tech as well as high tech ways to do this. Also, you can do the same sort of visibility from your customers, getting information about the orders that are coming up faster. That sort of visibility is going to prepare you for demand slumps and demand shocks. You're going to be able to see what, inventory is coming down, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one around there. Automation, there's very good solutions around automation. Automation can be robotic process automation, which, you can look at some of the vendors. They have great solutions around that to, automate data entry, increase your accuracy, increase your agility. By getting your data right in these aspects, you're going to improve your decision agility, right? And ultimately in the short to medium term, that's what we're looking at. And then, building on that. And so you can build into long-term use cases, right? So I'll leave it off there because we
actually already, it's a good thing that Stephanie brought this. I just wanted to point out to maybe our audience that if you are using, for example, Microsoft tools by way of Office 365 or whatnot, there are actually already a lot of automation capabilities just within Office 365, right? Microsoft has Power Apps, Microsoft has Automation Anywhere, that actually allows users, right, not coders, but users to help themselves set up automation within the Microsoft ecosystem. So so if you're again interested in those kind of capabilities, you can again talk to us, and we can introduce colleagues from our School of Infocom, or even my center. Yeah, could help you going and get started on those journeys.
All right, cool. So Dennis and Steph, last question before I open it up to questions from the participants again. Yeah. I see we've got questions on PDPA and things like that. So make sure you brush up on that. But what differences do you see between, say, what's happening here in Asia, the US, and Europe, in terms of adoption of digitalization and how we do things differently?
I think. Oh,
go, Dennis.
Stephanie, go ahead. Stephanie, go ahead. Yeah.
Ladies first.
I was just going to say there's different speeds in different economies, right? So and different emphasis. So you know, out of the US, there's a lot of the emphasis is on, you know, the product innovation and the capabilities there. And having said that, you know, when they're looking at, you know, last mile distribution, it's a lot easier. When it's in Singapore, whenever we're looking at, you know, the distribution aspect, it's certainly a lot more complex. So I think from, you know, you'll see different focuses. In Europe, we see greater emphasis on efficiency, on automation, especially physical automation. So you are looking at robotics. But having said that, Asia is very aggressive in terms of robotics use, right? So Korea is the #1 place. If you look at ratio of robots to workers, Korea has the highest ratio, right? China has, you know, some of the largest robotics, has the largest number of robots in the world. However, you know, they also rely to a certain degree on manual labor. So there's different speeds in different economies. A lot of the emphasis is on, you know, education of getting workers to be able to work with these capabilities across the board. The closer you get to more expensive labor centers, then there is an increased emphasis on this. When you have low cost labor, then there's, you know, obviously the emphasis on manual labor. But having said that, because they're, you know, the low cost labor centers are becoming the source for, you know, other more advanced economies, then the emphasis shifts to quality. And so quality of information, quality of product is forcing them down the digitalization route. So there are different dynamics in different economies that are pulling it, but I think everybody's being pulled down this route.
Yeah, actually, my answer was going to be pretty much. I mean, when I speak to, I don't speak to a lot of American companies, but I do speak to quite a fair bit of European companies. I think when it comes down to the nuts and bolts, all businesses kind of have the same cost structure type problems, right? Whether it's about labor or availability of labor and so on and so forth. But I think the main difference for us really is the scale, like what Stephanie has pointed out. But at the heart of it, really, a lot of problems are pretty much the same. But having said that, I think there's one thing that I would like to mention. Therefore, also is that when we think about technology, again, we shouldn't be so. We shouldn't have this mindset that technology is here to solve our cost problems, as in like is to replace a labor, for example, right? We really should be thinking about how do we use technology to scale our business rather than how to save a head count, right? Because if you're thinking from how to save cost point of view, technology can never make sense.
Yeah, if you're looking on a one-to-one replacement, absolutely right. If you're looking at creating at scale or adding different value added, then yes, it does scale that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, it's a bit like trying to own a car in Singapore, right? If you're thinking that how much cost can I save by owning the car? The answer is zero. But it's the value tied around if I invest in a car, right? What values am I able to derive out of it?
Right, Dennis. So, you know, based on this analogy that you actually presented, right? You know, totally agree, right? Technology won't be able to help save costs just alone. It is a human capital whatsoever that is included inside. What would be your perspective, right, in the terms, right, or rather that we would be seeing in the near, mid, and the long term in terms of the changes will come with the digitalization? And, you know, based on your experience, what should we be betting on? I mean, it's like for SMEs, right? What should be the main focus is in that sense?
I personally, from what I've seen, I think for most SMEs, unfortunately, they are actually still not even in the digitization stage yet, right? So don't even talk about digitalization. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So they really, and I think a lot of them. I mean, we have come across a lot of them during COVID, especially finding it extremely difficult to work from home simply because they are dealing with a lot of papers that are stuck in the office.
Right, definitely.
So I think the first big step really for a lot of our local enterprises, the small, medium enterprises, really essentially is to we must think digital first, right? Whatever processes that we're going to set up henceforth is how do we think digital first? Yeah. And then once that, like to Stephanie's point earlier, is that the digitalization allows us the visibility, the instantaneous visibility, right, that we don't have with paper, right? And from there, that's kind of where we can then build those capabilities, to help us to scale our business.
This brings back to part of the question about how do we re-educate the entire small medium enterprises in terms of their ability to be able to integrate together and go with a big bang flow about the digitalization. First step first, we need to digitize to be mentioned in the digital world, like what you mentioned, isn't it?
I think from at least from my point of view within the Polytechnic, and that's actually in some of my conversations with colleagues in government service is I do feel that we have to dumb down the language a little bit. I think some of the industry 4.0 languages are a bit daunting.
Yeah, okay,
even
definitely.
Robotic process automation, like what Stephanie has brought out, it's a big mouthful. It sounds very, very daunting. There's the word robotic, there's the word automation, right? Sorry?
Well,
yeah.
I said,
so I think to begin with, I think we all do need to I think dumb down the language a little bit, make it more relatable, so that more of our SMEs can embrace and not make it sound like it's so expensive, it's so out there that is beyond me.
So now, Dennis, this is a very valid question. And this is a very good point, right? When you mentioned that the SMEs need to be able to see the value, right? So the value, when we talk about the value, right, is it about the cost of adopting, or is it about the cost of enabling them to grow further? So this comes apart in terms of how we position the entire digitization, so to speak, per se, as a first step to them. What would be your thoughts about
this? But really the value really is about actually most of the time it's about growth. It's more that the fact that we can reach a larger segment. I mean, an example actually kind of in the early days when we saw a few startups trying to pre-COVID. I mean, COVID kind of changed the equation a lot, but pre-COVID when there were a lot of startups trying to do food delivery, right? A lot of hawkers did not want to get on board because they saw it as additional cost. But the moment people realize that actually coming on board a digital platform like that allows me to reach further than my traditional reach, right? Because the traditional reach, the traditional physical reach is I serve the neighborhood that I'm in, right? But the digitized platforms of online food ordering now allows cross neighborhood, right? From one end to the other end of the island, becomes your whole marketplace. And that's the value, right? That's the value that the digitization brought. It costs more, but your reach is also a lot more. That's how we need to think about how to use technology.
But it's not necessarily a value even in this case. In this case, it comes back to your first point, Dennis, I think, which is we're racing with competition, right? So it becomes a hygiene item. I think it's more about, this becomes something that if you don't do it, your competitor is doing it, and it's like trace, right? So track and trace. If you're a forwarder that doesn't have track and trace these days, it's becoming harder and harder to get business and stay current. You need to have that as a hygiene item, and I think a lot of this is happening.
Increasingly, a lot of them are hygiene. Increasingly, a lot of them are hygiene.
And so I'm actually going to jump up here and because I have noticed there's a question in the chat and it's related to what we're talking about here. It's this particular slide here where it's talking about disruption. I think the question in the chat was talking about was from Angus, who's new to the industry, and he was talking about disruption as where is it coming from, and what we're seeing is that most companies, most manufacturers are expecting, manufacturers and logistics companies are expecting to be disrupted within the next 5 years. And this is coming from not just current competitors who digitally transform, but also from digitally native competitors. So, you know, and it's the mindset that if I was to set up my business today, right, would I do the same processes that I did 20 years ago when I set it up? Absolutely not, right? Absolutely not. And so this is the kind of thinking that we need to bring into our existing business so that we can become one of these current competitors who digitally transform. And that we do end up, you know, disrupting is a common, probably misused word. I would say, you know, innovating to take the industry forward.
That's right.
Is probably a more accurate way of saying it. You know, ASEAN businesses, including Singaporean business, including logistics companies, are expecting that disruption to happen over the next 5 years. And you can see, you know, almost half of them expect this to happen, you know, within the next 12 months. And a lot of that is accelerated by COVID. So it's a question of, you know, not just you know, do we have to think about this, you know, is it value, is it cost? It's if we don't, are we going to still be around?
Great. I think, you know, great slide to end us on, Steph. I think this conversation between you, Dennis, Gary, and myself, we can continue for another 2 or 3 hours. Yeah. So it will really be a fireside chat because we'll continue into the night. Yeah. So really great. I really like the input from the two of you. You know, just not theories, but also very practical examples that we can use, adopt today. Dennis, I was cheeky enough. I put your email address into the chat.
Yeah, I just saw that. There's no problem. No problem. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if any of our participants have any questions, feel free to send it to us. And, you know, we're always on the lookout to improve. So if you see that QR code there, get your digitally enabled phone, scan the QR code, give us your feedback. And our next webinar is going to be looking at Japan, big in Japan. It's the first time Logisim is going to Japan. Yeah, Logisim is going to Japan. It's going to be a webinar that focuses around, of course, the topic of digitalization and predictive data, but we're looking at it from a Japan perspective. Before I end off, Stephanie and Dennis, 30-second takeaway summary points of what you want us to take away from this. Steph first.
I would say get educated. Somebody says, is there a go-to channel for SMEs to expand their comfort zone and start digitizing? You've got you know, if you're Singaporean, you've got your $500 to spend. Go find WebEx, go to Udemy, go to any of these sites and just start learning, because I think, you know, the lack of understanding and the fear around it is probably the biggest barrier.
Fantastic.
Actually, I have exactly the same message. Yeah, actually, I have exactly the same message that we need to step out of this fear, right, and really start exploring. Webinars like this, webinars like this do help to enrich our knowledge of what's out there. And these days there are tons of online webinars that you don't have to sit throughout, right? I mean, Raymond, you may not want to hear that. You don't have to sit throughout, right? But just taking part in parts of some of these, allows us to just really learn what's out there.
Yeah, and of course,
must have an inquisitive mind.
Yeah, and the best one to listen to is, of course, Logisim. I mean, what can I say? I'm just joking. No, but with that, thank you very much, Stephanie, Dennis, great conversation. And Gary, thanks for fielding the questions. I want to thank all our participants for signing up. I've put my email address in there as well. Give us your feedback. If you have any questions, email us, and we hope to see you at our next webinar. And thank you to everyone for participating this morning. Goodbye.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.